Well, this is something I've been thinking about doing for a while. A fab video on how to build a box or a bench or any sort of square frame. I am going to show you how to fab 101. Some of this stuff I've been taught, some of this stuff is self-taught. I'm qualified, I've gone to tech and learnt this as a trade as well. I'll tell you some tricks and tips and ways I personally fabricate a box or a rectangle. Plenty of ways to skin a cat. This way works for me, turns out spot on. That's all that matters. If it's quick and efficient, good, do it. If you get the same outcome as me, let me know. Awesome. Let's get to it. First things first, your surface. You want to start on something semi-flat or at the same height. I'm going to use a jig table, but you do not need a jig table. I'm just using it because this is the table in the room that I'm building these on beside the welder. It's not necessary for the same outcome. It's a little nicer. It does hold things square for these little pegs, but you don't need them. It's not necessary. I know guys that build these on trestles, sawhorses, stands, and get the same outcome. If I was at home and I needed to build something bigger than my bench, I'll be building it on the floor, on the ground. And that works just as well. Alright. Safety first, because you're watching. I sanded the tacks on my frame flush on the outside is because I just want to get a rough diagonal. A rough diagonal means just measuring from exact outside to outside. So this measurement is 2:169. And this one is 2:168. So this side is shorter, this side is longer. I want them the same to start with. You want a good ground to start on. So the reason I sanded those tacks flush is if there was a built-up bead and I'm putting my tape on the outside, it all adds up. So that's why I've just sanded them flush, so now I get the same measurement both ways. So now I'll do a tack weld to counteract that being out of square. The biggest thing that is going to stuff you up when building with steel is distortion. So it can be a hard thing to understand, but once you understand it, it'll really determine the way you build stuff from then on. So this frame is long this way and shorter this way. So theoretically, it's like that. So I want to counteract that. I want this to go that way, come in, so it's not 9, and I want that to go out that way, so it's not 8. I'm chasing half a mil, but it all adds up. So if I tack on the inside of here, it's going to want to pull in. If I tack on the outside of there, it's going to want to pull out. So we'll tack here. Purposely done hot, long tack then, because I want it to pull. Same there, want it to pull. I want that to pull in. Probably can't hear that, that just moved then. It won't take long for it to pull. Yeah, I can hear it pulling and distorting. So that's good. That's what we want. So the side you finish welding on is the way it's going to pull. So if I was to weld from the outside to the inside, it's going to pull in that direction. So theoretically, same thing again. Pretend this is a miter, and say I welded from outside to inside, it's going to pull in this direction. Same thing, if I weld it out, it's going to pull out. So I can control all that with just the direction I weld. Okay, so that has only literally been as long as it took to film explaining that. So here we are with the tape outside to outside. I wanted to film this so you can see. Okay, another little tip in fabricating and stuff. I am sighting my eye down the edge of this so it looks level down the edge, alright? Hold the tape there. So down the edge and the outside of that. 2160, what do you see? 2167, alright? It's the same thing here. Outside. What have we got here? So you look on the outside. Yeah, I'd say 67 as well. So that's good. Diagonally, that's good. Okay, another way we can check that to just prove what we've done. Flat on the inside. Slowly bring it up. Yeah, that's good. I want to see no air gaps there and no air gaps there, so it's good. Diagonally, the same number means it's square. Simple. And then we can check it against your fancy jig table for those of you that have it. And it's good as well. But some of the guys that have this jig table won't know those tricks because they rely on the jig table. So this is teaching you how to fab without fancy tools. That's why I'm doing this video, just trying to help you guys to build shit accurately. This is going to be a jig table for some carpenters to glue and fix on with clamps and screws. So it has to be solid and strong and can't distort and buckle. So it's got to be straight and not move when they're using all their G-clamps to glue up a cabinet or something like that. Okay, so we've almost got this right now. Now that I've done 2 hot welds or tacks here, it has not only pulled in that direction, it will pull up as well. Same thing, if this was here, we've done a weld along there, this is gonna actually pull up because we're welding on the top. If we've done a weld on the bottom, it's gonna pull up like that, both of them. So that's other stuff to think about, right? So, because I've done that tack, you can see the gap there. That's because I've done a tack on the top. It has lifted this, just one tack weld. So to counteract that, I could do a tack here and there and pull this side up and up. Or I could use this fancy jig table and clamp it down, but I won't. I'll do that tack and I'll show you what happens. Alright, let's do those opposite tacks to try and get out that rock in the table. Something I'm doing here is feeling whether those two bits of steel are flush and flat with each other. So I'm using a ruler or anything that's flat, and you can side it and see whether you see air gap or light under one side of the ruler to make sure it's flat. Okay, so after just doing those two tacks, letting it cool, now it's flat on the bench. And also flat on the bench. Just double check this. Still spot on. So it didn't pull as far because we'd done the opposite direction tack. So now that's flat, that's square. Now we've got a good platform to work upwards from. Okay, so that platform's done, and there's the top piece, which is exactly the same. Flat, square, gonna sit on top. The hardest part is making them symmetrical and square and in line and flat. So we just sit these on, and your cut doesn't have to be dead square and nice. This is just straight off the bandsaw. You can probably get a nicer cut with an angle grinder. So what I'm doing is just feeling that it's flush on the outsides. Flush on the outside. And then 2 foot square, flat on here, and slowly bring it up so we can see what it's doing. It's pretty good. It's touching at the bottom and not at the top. So it has to pull this direction. Then we'll check this one. Slowly bring it up. It's just sitting there. Okay, same thing, touching at the bottom, it's got to pull in that way. So it's got to pull that way and that way. So I'm going to tack this first. I'll double check that it's flush on the outside and I haven't bumped it, and I'm going to do a tack. This is the part where you flick your helmet down and you knock the post off. So, this is the way we tack that. It's going to pull. So I can still go that way. That way is square. So what I need to do compensate for that tack that I'm about to do. I'm going to push it over square a bit to me. I tack this corner, it's going to pull away from me. I do it about 1.5 mil. Okay, so square there. It's got a slight gap at the base here, so it can still go and distort more. This way, a slight gap at the top, so I can pull that and counteract that as well. So I've only done 2 tacks on this, there and there, so I can swing it this way easily. And the next tack is obviously going to be on one of these corners. So the next tack will counteract this as well. Slight air gap, you can just see it. So if I tack this corner, it's going to pull away from it, which is good. So that's probably where I'm going to tack. And this, it's already too far over that way. So I'm going to knock this back like 1.5 mil and still tack this corner and then let it cool and shrink and it'll be square. Okay, this is where I sort of need a tripod. Alright. I want that 1.5 mil gap. It's touching there. So that's good. 1.5 mil, and now I'm going to tack the outside. I wanted to do this while it was hot. You can normally see this gap close up with the distortion. So remember, I just had a 1.5 mil gap there, and I tacked the outside corner, and it's pulled. See how there's no gap there now? It's touching at the base. And there's the slightest gap, like fingernail gap there, which is okay. We're not finished. I could do another tack here and it'll pull and sort of close that up. Let's check it this way, see how that's looking. Yeah, see, that's good as well. That's good. So I'm not using any wanky cheater bars or weld cast iron blocks or magnets. I'll just sit it on there, look at what it's doing and tack it so it pulls in the direction you want it to pull. So that's done. So I do that for every upright. I'll do it again now. Alright, so sit it on there, get something as a straight edge so it's flush on the outside, flush on the outside, flush, 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 flush. Okay, so that's good. Now we see what it's doing. Now 2 foot square. It's sitting cocked that way. And it's sitting cocked out that way. So I'm going to tack this inside corner and we can pull it the direction we want. offset it 1.5 mm. That's good. That's also good. So it's tack, tack, gun, next. So it's quick. There's no G clamping stuff. It's as simple as that. Alright. Last leg I'll do in real time. Just gonna sit it on there. And it's good because you can kind of use your other legs as a bit of a straight edge. So you can see it's leaning this way a smidge. And straight away, that way's pretty good. Probably leaning in a bit. So, grab a straight edge, push it hard up against this. You can see there's a bit of a gap there. So it'll be touching on this side. So just push hard onto this part. And it should be touching. Simple, simple. Same on the outside, pushing hard on this part, and lining it up. Like so. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we'll just double check with our 2-footer. It's going to come back to me a smidge. It's going to go out. Stuff all. I'm going to tuck that edge. Keep your eyes. Tucked. Yep, it's going. Good. You can see we've got a slight gap at the base now, so if I tack the opposite side, it's going to pull away and be square. So a slight gap at the top now, so tack this side, it'll pull over. Which side do I want to tack though? So that's pretty much square now. Once it's cooled, it's sort of distorted in a square way. And still see a slight gap at the base, so I'm going to tack that edge. See the gap, air gap is already closed up at the top. It's actually starting to pull. See, we've got an air gap at the base now. This one, what are you doing? It's pretty much so square. Oh, it's like air gap. Tack that edge. So I'm hoping this is all starting to make sense for you. Yeah, see how we've got a slight gap up the top now because of that last tack. This is it's really good at the base. Slight air gap at the top. So that's good. Tacking this last corner will pull it in the direction we want. Simple as that. Now we're going to put the top on and then we're done. So I'm just walking around it and shuffling it so it's all sort of matching up. It's just a bit of finessing. Yeah, see what I'm dealing with here, slight sort of gap. That could be this being out a bit. This could be a smidge bigger than that, or it might just need to go that way. These ones I'm not too worried about yet. Yeah, it's got to come out. What's this one on? It's got to go over that way a bit. But it's flush there. A little bit there. A little bit there, which is fine. Alright, so we're sort of close. So that's pretty spot on there. But we've got a bit of a rock here. So here's a quick telltale whether we're out. Yep, there's a slight gap there, so that's good. That is saying that this leg has to go in on the square and up here. Here's another way we can check by checking diagonals once again. So we can go to the outside of this leg. It's 1 meter 56. Same thing here. What's this one saying? 54. So that's also saying it's out of square. This side's under 54. This side's out 56. So if that went in 1 mil and this went out a smidge, diagonally it'll be good. And you could put the tape up on here as well, but this is just floating. This is sort of locked in, so yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, that's all tacked. I could almost do a weld on the outside and get that to pull, but it's pretty close, so I'm going to just tap this out a smidge and probably tack it. Needs a little bit more of a persuasion. Okay, so that's it's touching up top, it's touching at the base, so that's good. I want it to go that way a bit before I tack it. Kind of hard to do all one-handed. Smidge more, and then I'm going to tack it. See, I could put the square on it. That's good. Just double check. What's the leg doing? Yeah, it's good. It's good. So I'd rather move the top to make it suit the leg, because the leg is right. Switch more. That's still good. We'll just check this in before we hit it too far. Yeah, I don't want to hit it too much more. We'll make that one suit. Okay, so what was it? Yeah, it's pretty bloody good. It's not much. When you look here, yeah, it's not much. Okay, outside tack. So that's done, and now I could cut this one tack here and bring the leg in. See, there's not much resistance there either, so I can probably do it by hand as well. I will. So I'll get that good, which it is, which is nice. And I'll just with my hands, do that, and tack the outside. I'll put another time lapse up. Okay. Look at that. Look at that. And curiosity. Yeah, see, that's square. So that's good. And double check it this way. It's good as well. Maybe a slight gap up top, but it'll be the thickness of my ruler. It's not much at all. We can check diagonals as well, which will be a true telltale whether it's square. So now I'm looking on this outside. Sorry, that tack is in the way. I should really radius that, but I'm going to actually look down the length of the steel and ignore the tack. So I would say that is 1.84 meters. Same thing here, we have a tack in the way, but if I picture the tack not being there, like I've sanded it all flush, like I will when it's done, we have, just trying to hold the tape so you can see, I'd say that's 83. So I'm 1 mil out at the moment, diagonally, right? So we can check it with our square, we can check it diagonally. This side's short, that side's long. So if I tack if I tack the inside of this, it's gonna pull out more. So I wanna tack the inside of this so it'll pull out that way. That's fine, it's fine. So we'll leave that and we'll go to the other end and start doing the same the other end. And then we'll do this way as well. We'll check diagonals on this plane and this plane. We'll check it square. Because this is square, it's sitting where it needs to sit. I was triple checking it because I just didn't believe it. But yeah, if I set that up against there, it's good, it's spot on. And I checked the height because I've got a gap, like a 1 mil gap. And I checked that height and it's sitting where it should. So in other words, I've cut this just a bit too short. So I'm not gonna push it down and close the gap up or anything, because then this jig table will be bent. If anything, you kind of wanna counteract that and like get a screwdriver and just flare it a bit, tack it, and then pull the screwdriver out. So that's what I'm gonna do right now and go and do the other side. And we've pretty much got this tacked up. So just to elaborate a bit on the screwdriver theory is, if I tacked that with that 1 mil gap, it's gonna shrink. Suck down and then literally bow the bench. So you over counteract it, flare it up a bit, tack it with it risen, and then by the time I do 4 tacks and do some welds, it's still gonna shrink a bit, but not as much as 1 mil, and close right up and then have a bent bench. So that's just little things to be aware of. 2 foot square is balancing there just for reference. Same thing this side. 1 mil gap. So I will use my screwdriver trick again. And I was just looking at my string line, my chalk line. I'm just a bit off. So if I do this, I sit it hard on here, bring it across, that's another sort of reference. So just a double check. Yeah, in 2 areas I'm getting an alignment error. So I'm literally just gonna pull the bench, pull this brace over a bit and then tack it. Use my screwdriver to allow for that shrink of the 1mm gap. And then we'll check some diagonals and we're pretty good. Okay, so we're fully tacked together. I'll go and whack some more tacks everywhere, opposite. I'll do a time lapse so you can see how I do that. This is just a brace to hold a bottom shelf. And I've also gone in and tacked corners as well, which are just gonna have holes in it so they can screw their thick bench top to it. So that's it all tacked up. I will check diagonals once more, just that way, one end, and on the side, lengthways, and then tack it up and weld it up. If at this stage you had a rock in it, or it was out of square and not central, this is what I do. Turnbuckle can be just a cheap shit one, or an old rusty one. Doesn't have to be a fancy stainless one like this. Tack it on there, and you can pull and push your bench in the direction you want. Same this way, same that way. You could run 3 of these if you needed it to really get it back to where you need, but if you need 3 of these on this bench, it's probably at the point where you want to cut tacks and go again. Anyway, watch me tack this up. So as you can see, I tack diagonals as well, and I weld diagonals as well. So same principle as what I've taught you with the way it'll pull. My logic is if I tack here, tack there, I want to tack here, I want to tack down there. So it's all pulling and fighting against each other. So it can't distort and go too far. Yes, I got it clamped down, but I have that option. You don't need to do that. I just want to know at the end of the day, this is an expensive jig table, it's got to be right. If it did distort and pull, I could use the turnbuckles and an oxy to get it back, or literally dropping it on the corner that is diagonally a longer number and trying to push it back the other way, and giving it a bit of a crack and a hit in the other direction. As simple as that. So now I'll get to it and weld it up. And my logic with welding, you start from the inside and weld out. Start from the inside and weld out. Inside, out, inside, out, inside, out, inside, out. Now I'll do the tops and just do the opposite either end so it can pull and distort against each other. And yeah, as simple as that. so that's how I'd approach welding a box or a rectangle or a car chassis, anything really. Bike chassis, you kind of want to weld in the opposite direction and make it pull and distort against each other. These outside ones are just vertical downs. Actually, a lot of the stuff I was doing was just vertical down because it doesn't really matter. In Australia, we don't do that American weave back pull stuff. It's not how we were taught. I was taught to push with the shielding gases. I know tradesmen today that are qualified and they pull, which is wrong. Your shielding gas is supposed to surround the parent metal, so you push. Yeah, that's how I was taught at Tech. It's qualified. Ticketed welder. I have to do some vertical downs here that I've missed, but other than that, it's welded. And if you sight your eye along there, it hasn't been too bad, up or down, when you want that flat. Anyway, that's welding 101. Fab. Good. Okay, so that's done. Give it a bit of a sand. I'm finished. I could weld these diagonals, but it doesn't need it. It's fully welded and down the side. Does it need it? No. This is just a bench. One other thing I'd like to point out is if you want to sand something flat, you want to hold your grinder flat. Don't hold it like this or like this. You want to wash this material into that. So, my opinion of sanding. So, that was like under a minute. These little lines here is undercut. I could go back and weld that up, but it is just a bench, it doesn't matter. I'll sand this flush and then I'll radius it to suit this. I'll show you that in a sec. So under a minute, outside sanded. Same radius as that. I could do a few spot welds and fill those lows if I wanted, but it's not necessary on this job. It's just a bench.